Guys, welcome into the Fireside Bears YouTube channel. Usayd and Max Smith here as your host. You can follow us on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Fireside Bears. You can follow myself and Max on Twitter at Max Smith ESM and at Usayd. Max, the Bears are back. They're playing this weekend. Apparently, tickets in the 400 section are only going for $67. So the weather's going to be terrible, and it's going to be like a 12 or 13 hour trek down to Soldier Field because it's going to take couple hours to get there, all the traffic, the game, tailgating, blah, blah, blah. But hey, $67 is a bargain buy for a team that's only 1 or 2 spots out of the playoffs, which is pretty much what the Bears have been under Matt Nagy outside of 2018. A team that's good, but not good enough. But how you doing, man?
Good. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's not the case for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which a nosebleed goes for about $300 there. It's what you get when you win the Super Bowl and you have Tom Brady as your quarterback. People actually want to pay money to see your games. Couldn't be the Bears situation, but no, it should be totally indicative of how the fan base in the city kind of feels about the organization right now. And I'm 100% positive McCaskies are looking at that and are going, oh, we should probably make some changes here. Let's make sure that our tickets aren't the cheapest show in town, right? Used to be Chicago Bulls for the past couple of years, but now it's the Chicago Bears, unfortunately. Shout out to the Bulls. Billy Donovan winning Coach of the Month. Feels weird seeing the Bulls be good again, but here we are. But we're going to talk about the Bears. That's why we're here. We're going to talk about the Cardinals preview, like you mentioned. Longest rivalry is coming back to town. The Cardinals are coming back home. It's been a while since they've played in Chicago. An interesting thing for the Cardinals, anytime whenever they play Chicago, specifically later, like in December, it's a warm weather team. They live in Arizona. Of course, they play in a dome in Arizona, but they also have the opportunity to practice outside. And it's going to be an interesting day. So if there's anything going for the Bears, it's going to be that weather. But we're going to talk about injury report. We're going to talk about how Hopkins and Kyler Murray are back. Number 1-2 punch for the Cardinals are back in action. Not that it really slowed them down any of the past couple of games. We're going to talk about how Robinson wasn't at practice today. Allen Robinson was gone. Akeem Hicks. Some other key players weren't there. We're going to talk about Justin Fields a little bit. And then we're going to finish up with what happens if the Bears win. Where does that put us in the playoff picture? If we do somehow squeak it, win against the number 1 ranked team in the NFC, what does that look like for us? But first, let's jump into Cardinals. Cardinals look really good even without Kyler Murray at quarterback. Why is that?
Well, you're looking at a lot of factors, by the way, and let me just say this for the record. I mean, yeah, the Bears are back. $67. I was looking at it, and I'm like, wow, that's incredibly, incredibly cheap, even for the Bears, because I think even when the Bears were winning like 3 games, the cheapest tickets were against the Lions for like $130, But anyways, enough of the ticket talk. Just know that if you do end up buying tickets, that you heard it here first. But listen, the Cardinals are good because if you look at Cliff Kingsbury, he is one of the better offensive minds in the league. Okay, he's coming from this college offense. Again, Texas Tech, I believe, is in the Big 12. We've all heard the saying they don't even play defense in the Big 12. Okay, and so ultimately, when you look at that, this kind of Red Raider offense that's slowly and slowly transitioning more and more into the NFL, you see that Kyler Murray is without a doubt a really good fit for the offense. And I want to talk about quarterback fits here because the Bears are dealing with this too. Everyone seemingly is talking about, well, Justin Fields, you need to get the right coach. You need to get the right guy. The Bears need to get it right with Justin Fields. There's also the other half of this, and the Cardinals are a organization that has shown, hey, we can build around a dual threat quarterback. And guess what? The Bears can use this same template. Okay, is that the Cardinals, right? They've basically come out and said, hey, we're going to surround Kyler Murray with all the talent in the world. We know he's a dynamic athlete. I think when we speak of dynamic athletes, one of the big things that people need to take into account is that take a look at some of the really successful quarterbacks in the NFL. Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, even you could say Patrick Mahomes. What's something that they've had in common? Those guys are also baseball players. I'll throw Colin Kaepernick in there because he had a pretty good run too about a decade ago. But these guys are baseball players as well. And that's translated over to the football field. Justin Fields is a baseball player too. You're seeing some of those baseball skills, like the ability to slide, translate over the field, the ability to just have such a tight zip and have a gunslinger mentality, gunslinger for an arm, have a cannon for an arm, essentially. That's translated over the field. The point is that in 2019, Murray came in, he was a rookie, and he had his ups, he had his downs. And then going into 2020, he was one of the players that I thought was going to break out for sure. But then at the end of the day, the problem was that the virtual offseason cost him so many physical reps. His breakout years actually come this year. And so the Cardinals basically made a commitment to Kyler Murray and said, hey, we see your ability as a runner, but we also want to develop you as a passer. So what do you do to develop your young franchise quarterback as a passer? Well, you go out and you trade for a guy like DeAndre Hopkins. Now, I want to talk about Hopkins for just a second here because we know what DeAndre Hopkins is, but what needs to be talked about is what DeAndre Hopkins brings to that Cardinals offense is so valuable. He's essentially like Devontae Adams all over again, just in the sense that he covers up so many different holes. And when Hopkins isn't playing, the offense takes a noticeable step back. And then you look at the complementary pieces around him. Forget the run game and Chase Edmonds and Kenyon Drake for a second. That's kind of a non-factor for the Cardinals because they have shown the ability to be a pass-first team. Still a pretty good run game. What makes the Cardinals such a good team is that you have Murray and you have Hopkins, but then you have these nice complementary pieces, right? So you have a Rondale Moore, you have a Christian Kirk, you've got players like Zach Ertz and Andy Isabella. Complement that with a really good defense, and kaboom, you have a winning formula. And so this Cardinals team has been flashy. It's had its ups and it's had its downs, but Murray and Hopkins have developed this chemistry that have just made the offense click so much faster than a lot of people expected. And this offense plays really fast. They're going to keep the defense on their toes 99% of the game.
Yeah, this offense is a well-oiled machine, and what you said about Coach Kingsbury is really interesting, right? Because I mean, he was the Red Raider, really kind of brought Patrick Mahomes to the fruition of a lot of NFL scouts. I mean, not everybody, obviously, he wasn't number one for a lot of people, but he created a system for his mobile quarterback. Like you said, with their baseball players, the one thing that makes that special is the ability to change the launch angle, right? Their ability to throw on the run, off balance, make really kind of ugly looking throws to traditional Puritan quarterback coaches. But at the end of the day, the ball is able to go far, regardless of where they are in the field, if they're off balance, etc. And it's accurate because that's what they did playing baseball for such a long time. So what Kingsbury was able to do with Patrick Mahomes is what he was essentially able to do for Kyler Murray as well, which is let me use my guy who's incredibly good on the run. Let's use this different launch angles. Let's use this ability to run off, throw off balance. We're going to use this to his advantage. And when you surround him with talent, good things happen, right? And what I think is incredibly telling of just how good of a coaching staff this is they're able to squeak out 2 wins. I wouldn't say squeak out, pretty handedly win 2 games. Got blown out by the Panthers, but they're able to pretty handedly win 2 games with Colt McCoy at quarterback instead of Kyler Murray. So this offense is a well-oiled, well-run machine. And there's a reason that they're 8-2 right now, and there's a reason that we're not. So that's definitely interesting to look at and to watch. You know, from the defensive perspective, we had issues with the secondary all season long. That's something we've said all season long. I don't expect anything to be different. If there's a team that completely blow us up in the secondary, it's going to be the Arizona Cardinals. Fortunately for us, like I said, we do have a bit of the weather aspect. It'll be in the high 40s, low 50s, but it'll be incredibly windy that day. And it's supposed to be raining. So it's not a great day to throw the Brock. It's a great day to pound the ball. And I think that the difference between the Cardinals and the Bears at this point is I think the Bears might have a little bit of a leg up on the power running game, but who knows what kind of team we see when they come out on Sunday. But the Arizona offense it can do a lot without having to pass the ball. If Kyler, like I said, Kyler was out, they're still able to win 2 games with Colt McCoy at quarterback. So there's a lot to watch, which is fun. It should be an exciting game because we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we do know that Kyler Murray is back. We don't know how limited he'll be in the game. We might see some limitations in the first quarter to see if he's okay to go full game speed or not. And Devontae Hopkins is back, which is great. DeAndre Hopkins. So that's what we're looking at the Cardinals side. Let's move over to the Bears side. A little bit of an extended weekend after the short week between Baltimore and Detroit, so they have more time to rest. But interestingly enough, Allen Robinson, Akeem Hicks, Marcus Goodwin, and Roquan Smith were not at practice today. We also see Cole Kmet as limited, as well as Justin Fields. Any concern that Fields, the big question mark around this game for the Bears side is, will Fields play this game? Will he start, or will he get eased into it and get some reps? What do you know?
So what I know essentially is that the Bears are going to make Fields a game time decision, and they're going to list him as questionable. They might even have him dressed, but they're going to list him as a game time decision and basically say, hey, you know what, you're questionable, which means, yeah, you're going to be in uniform, but depending on how you're feeling on Sunday morning, when you do go through all those pregame warmups that start around like 9 a.m., 9:30 at Soldier Field, from there, we'll go ahead and we'll see, how you feel, how are you moving. I think one of the big things to understand is that he needs to be able, so basic quarterback play is predicated on one thing. Okay, you need to have good footwork, you need to have good mechanics. Okay, you need to have essentially the ability to plant your feet. Your front foot needs to be facing the target that you're going to throw at. And then what that's going to do is basically you need to fully rotate your hips, okay, and put all your torque into that. If into the throw. If you're not fully stepping into the throws and fully rotating your hips, you're going to get kind of a wobbly and a spirally football that's coming out. Okay, mincing words there, but the point is that if Justin's not able to do that, I do not want him playing in this game, simply because you are going up against a really good defense. Okay, you have to factor something in right here. You are essentially saying, you know what, we've won only 4 games. The season's a quote unquote lost cause. All right, but we don't want to injure you further. We would rather have you for the last 5 games of the season than have you in a game where the Cardinals are favored by, I think, nearly 8 points. And you know what? We're more content with starting Andy Dalton. Pretty much what's another meaningless game. So ultimately, Fields, that's what it's going to come down to. Okay. You need to be able to evaluate Justin. If he's not fully stepping into some of those throws, you know what? Don't play him, because you don't want him to get out there with a guy like a Chandler Jones on the other side and Zaven Collins roaming the middle of the field and potentially re-injure himself. That's just how it is. Now, I want to talk about these other injuries that we've got here too. You got Allen Robinson, Akeem Hicks, Marquise Goodwin, no Roquan Smith. Robinson and Hicks, well, guess what? They've been out since pretty much the Baltimore game, all right? Then you have Marquise Goodwin, who injured his foot against the Detroit Lions. You would hope that it's healed, but you know what? Hasn't really healed yet. It's just going to be one of those where, you know what? He's probably not even going to play in this game. So guess what? You're going to see more Isaiah Coulter as well as Jakeem Grant, more Demir Bird too. And then again, Darnell Mooney's going to be your number 1 wide receiver. Not having Roquan Smith in the middle of the defense certainly hurts. The Bears really need that depth. They need that speedy off-ball linebacker to kind of slow down this 1-2 Cardinals rushing attack. So no Roquan Smith. So you're basically looking at guys like Alec Ogletree as well as Christian Jones starting. Cole Kmet being limited is good, but it's also bad because you are going to have a big body tight end and a big target in the middle of the field that essentially is missing, or that's going to be valuable with no Allen Robinson, which is very likely, by the way. And so ultimately, you're going to need that target. And let's just say Fields plays, or whoever the starting quarterback is, one aspect of the Bears quarterbacks this year, no matter whether it's been Fields or Andy Dalton, is that these guys have developed a good amount of chemistry with the tight ends, which is better than the chemistry that the quarterbacks have with the wide receiver room.
Yeah, there's definitely an issue, I feel, with Allen Robinson being out. It's clear Darnell Mooney is not that position or possession guy that we might have anticipated him to be. He's very much more of that yards after catch guy. It was very clear that we were missing a large piece of the offense without that outside presence that is Allen Robinson. That's going to give some opportunities for guys like Darnell Mooney or Marquise Goodwin. That unfortunately, that presence will be missing. So that doesn't pen well for the Bears offense this Sunday, nor does it pen well for Allen Robinson's free agency hopes throughout this offseason. The less reps he gets towards the end of the season, the less dollar signs he's more likely to see, as teams might see him a bit as more of a gamble. But, this Cardinals defense is tough. It's an incredibly strong unit, and it's been relatively strong over the past 3 seasons. Even when the offense was struggling under Kyler Murray and Kingsbury first year, the defense was playing pretty lights out. What's really stunning about this defense is their forced fumbles are at 17, which is fantastic, right? From any defensive standard or metric. Marcus Golden is having a fantastic year, like you mentioned. He's has 10 sacks right now, and he's 4 forced fumbles, as I read off the stat sheet. But anytime you've ever had the opportunity or the pleasure to watch an Arizona Cardinals game this year, you've known that they apply consistent pressure on the quarterback, just play in and play out whenever the defense is on the field. we wouldn't have that amazing meme of Aaron Rodgers on the ground if it wasn't for the Arizona Cardinals, right? So this is a tough defense. They're tough. They love to play tough. They're really rough. They're not afraid to throw you on the ground. They're not afraid to get a little bit dirty. The last thing I want personally is to throw Justin out there unless we know he's 110, 120, 130% right? And this guy, Justin, is such a tough guy that he's going to want to go out there regardless if he's feeling 110%. But from the organizational standpoint, they have to make sure that they're not putting Justin in an opportunity to further injure himself, right? Because we've leveraged the entire future, not the entire, but a good amount of future of this franchise on this guy. So if it comes down to game time decision, I'd much rather lose with Andy Dalton than lose with Justin Fields having to leave the game or further injure himself, right? Or a new injury. So that, you're completely right on the ball there. That's what I'm looking at when I think about quarterback situation and scenario in this game. And, Andy Dalton, he's proven that he can put us in positions to win the game. The Baltimore defense wasn't nearly as good as the Arizona Cardinals defense is. And the Detroit Lions can't blow a candle anywhere near these two teams on any phase of the ball. But it still goes to show that Andy Dalton still can perform, as an admirable backup. So I'm not totally uncomfortable with the idea of Andy Dalton getting to start this game. I don't think we would win even if Justin started. This Arizona Cardinals team is just flat out too good. Their DVOA is insane. I mean, if we pull up their Football Outsider stats, they're 4th overall. Their offense is 10th best. Their defense is 3rd best. Their passing offense is really where their bread and butter is at. If the weather can take that out, it might be a lower scoring game than anticipated. Their running offense isn't as good as their passing offense. But regardless, their offense is just good. So there's not a lot to dislike about this Cardinals team. There's a lot to dislike about the Bears, as I'm sure we're all aware. And I'd like to touch on the chemistry aspect that you were talking about when we're talking about our younger guys, because in our previous episode, we talked about how the young guys really came out and won us that game against Detroit. Sound like the veterans kind of just said, screw it. But the younger guys are really hungry. They're really looking to get wins. They're really looking to get better, which is something we love to see. And if there's an opportunity to keep our young guys safe, i.e. Cole Kmet, not put him in opportunities to get hurt for meaningless wins, obviously that's what the franchise should do. Obviously, that's what Matt Nagy should do. But yeah, I'm not going to speculate anything else there because injuries are a tough area of contention, especially when they're young guys that we all have a lot of hope and want to see the future of this franchise bring success to them, and they bring success to the franchise. That's mincing of words, but I guess it's just one of those days for us here. So with that being said, let's move into our final part of our discussion here, which is what happens if the Bears win this weekend. Real quick, will be, drumroll please, about 2 to 3% more likely to get into the playoffs, which means we go from, I think it's 3% to 5%. And that's a pretty big percentage jump, okay? So I don't want any of you guys to scoff at that. It's a pretty good number. But what happens if we win this game, Usayd? What's going on in your head there?
Well, let me touch on one last injury thing. Mario Edwards Jr. has a ribs injury, hasn't practiced, so that's more defensive line depth. That's really been an issue for the Bears. Now, here's what happens if you win this game. Look at the Bears' remaining schedule, okay? You have Arizona, Green Bay, Minnesota, Seattle, the New York Giants, and then Minnesota Vikings. You got 6 games remaining. After this weekend, you're going to have 5 games remaining. This schedule is not as tough as a lot of people anticipated it to be just a month ago, okay? And let me just say this for the record too. When you look at kind of the 5 or 6 game stretch from week 6 to 12, it was like week 3 or 4, and I was saying the same thing. I'm like, that stretch now with Tampa, Green Bay, San Francisco, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, it's not looking as tough. What happened? The Bears ended up losing 2 of those games merely because of the refs, okay? They were pretty close against the Packers. They were ended up, Baltimore, there were some iffy calls, but, and then they beat the Detroit Lions. Now, The reason I bring this final 6-game stretch up is because there's a realistic chance the Bears could finish here at 3-3. Okay. They're not going to go 1-5 or 2-4 like a lot of people anticipate they are, but I think they're going to finish off the last 6 games 500. Let's just say you beat Arizona. Okay. You have more momentum on your side because you just beat a team that is likely going to be hosting a home playoff game. And then you know what, Green Bay, that's going to be a tough one. But if Fields is back, well, then you know what? There's a very legit chance that the Bears could call for an upset because they're going to be playing some inspired football. This whole team, I know we're sitting here at 4-7. This whole team is really rallied around Justin Fields, and it's hard to find the last time the entire Bears fan base rallied behind just one set quarterback. Okay. Didn't happen with Mitch. And then you look at Minnesota. Well, Kirk Cousins, we know he likes to line up under his, I believe it's his right guard, and then snap the invisible football. So Minnesota, you know what? I think the Bears are going to be at home. They could certainly go ahead. It's going to be an 8-day rest from December 12th to the 20th, so an extra day to prepare. I certainly think the Bears have a chance at beating Minnesota. And for some reason, the Bears are always just pretty decent on Monday Night Football against the Vikings. You go to Seattle, well, that offense has really lost its mojo. Okay, Russ isn't the same as he used to be. There's speculation about, hey, is his finger the one holding the offense back? Okay. And so Seattle, tough environment, but again, compared to 2 to 3 months ago, it looks like a pretty winnable game. And then you got the New York Giants, and then you're wrapping it up with Minnesota. My point is that yeah, the Bears are 3 games under 500. Yeah, the Bears have like a 2 to 3% chance of making the playoffs. Yes, it's a foregone conclusion that if the Bears make the playoffs this season, then what's happening is this: that they're on the road playing a team like Arizona or Tampa Bay or Green Bay. And that's fine and dandy. But the reason you can't count the Bears out of the playoffs until they're officially out of the playoffs and officially eliminated on paper is because the last 6 games of the season are all against NFC teams. And that bodes really, really well for a team that is looking to make the playoffs. And again, this is the first time we've had a 17-game season. So we don't know what a 17-game playoff pitch, I'm sorry, a 17-game regular season is going to look like, and what the impact of a 17-game regular season is going to have on the playoffs. We don't know that. So ultimately, I'm not saying the Bears are in the playoffs, but you can't necessarily rule it out either because they haven't been eliminated from contention. And I do want to say one thing as well. If you look at NFL standings, okay, what you need to find, I think a lot of people have to find something to be interesting, right? Is that there's also a couple things here and there that can swing the Bears' way. So, like, take the Giants, the Seahawks, both in last place in their division, the Lions, too, okay? The Bears basically are playing, well, they swept the Lions this year, but they're also playing the Giants and Seahawks, which means that if there are playoff tiebreakers on the line, the Bears, technically speaking, have the upper hand. And then the Vikings are sitting here at 5-6. Well, guess what? The Bears have 2 games against the Vikings lined up. So what I'm saying is that 4 games are against teams that are in the NFC that have not necessarily been eliminated from playoff contention, but are on the brink of being eliminated, and you have a really good opportunity to hold the tiebreakers against those teams, which ultimately those games, the 2 against the Vikings, the Giants game, and the Seahawks game, could be the deciding factors for the Bears.
Yeah, my bad. There's a couple of teams that when we look at the mathematical probability of it, because my favorite time of the year where I start playing with all these million different scenarios that could potentially happen. The teams that the Bears need to lose if we want to make the playoffs, and you never want to be in a situation where you have to wait for other teams to lose. The Cardinals might come out swinging because we took their playoff spot last year. Kind of handed to us, unfortunately. I thought the Cardinals would have done really well in the playoffs if they made it, better than we did. But that was a really, really interesting spot. What I think the teams that we need to lose are the Saints, right? The Falcons need to start losing, because if the Falcons start winning again, we're looking at a potential. We don't play the Falcons, but they beat teams that we haven't, etc. Long story. We need them to lose. Obviously, we need the Vikings to lose. And then we're looking at the Washington football team, because it looks like they're going to be the wild card spot in the East. So we need them to start losing or winning for us if they solidify that fact that they're going to be like a 6 or a 5 seed. So there's a lot of different scenarios that could potentially happen. But like we said, it's not like we don't want the Bears to be a playoff team. It's never a terrible thing to say that we're in the playoffs, but we kind of do, because then we have more reason to be upset at ownership to remove head coaching. But, we've seen Lovie Smith fired after a 10-win season. Yes, we didn't make the playoffs that year, but it was 10 wins, right? So stranger things have certainly happened. But no, you're incredibly right. Like, looking at this schedule now, we thought the Seahawks were going to be a lot harder than it turns out that they are. We played a really good game against the Packers, and I thought the Packers would be a lot more difficult than they are right now. They just lost to the Vikings, which was a crazy game. It was an absolute shootout. But the Packers defense was embarrassed, and Dalvin Cook's out. So we don't know if he's going to be back in time for Week 15. Who knows what's going on there? But that could be a potential opportunity for the Bears to steal a win from the Vikings. The Bears can't afford to lose one game in the next 5. If they lose one in the next 5, there's still a good chance, if they win out, that they can make the playoffs. But they have to wait for other teams to make mistakes. They have to wait for other teams to lose, because we did lose a good amount of our NFC games earlier in the season. Like you mentioned, we don't have those tiebreakers. And some of those teams, like the Rams, like the 49ers, are fighting for some of those. Well, the Rams are probably going to win their division, but the 49ers are definitely fighting for a playoff spot. So that's another team that we need to lose. Fortunately, the Seahawks will probably be eliminated from contention. We might have the opportunity to do that in week 16, which would be pretty interesting, because Russ could have obviously hopped over to Chicago, but he didn't. Not that him getting injured has anything to do with that, but there's a bit of an interesting storyline there. But, we're currently sitting at 2%. So our hopes are very much still alive. We're in the hunt, ladies and gentlemen, not looking good. But if the Bears are able to squeak out this win against the Cardinals, there's going to be a lot of conversations that had to be had about what is the momentum in this team, what is driving this team to win, why is this team winning, and where can this team go once things have started to figure out. For some strange reason, the Bears are such like a third quarter team. Like, statistically, they're not, but when it comes to the season, they always seem to get it together when it matters the most. That's typically not a sign of good coaching, right? Because whenever your boss is like really encouraging you to get the job done right before the deadline, probably not a good boss. He should probably, encourage you the entire time once you've been given the project up to the delivery date. But if it's 2 days before the delivery date and he's really inspiring you to go out there and get it done, well, look, you're 4-7 right now, and you're gasping for a playoff spot, right? So, yeah, like you said, and like we're going to continue to say, anything can happen until it can't. And until we lose 2 or more games, which we very much well could against the Packers, we could split with the Vikings, we could lose against Cardinals. But I don't anticipate us losing to the Giants, because in week 17, when we play the New York Giants, there's a good opportunity that the Giants will have been eliminated from playoff contention. They had a fantastic win against the Eagles, which isn't saying a lot looking at the record, but it's still momentum for that team to look towards a potential playoff berth, but they have to get through the rest of their division. And they have some tough matches coming up ahead as well. So anything can happen. We'll just keep saying it, but that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, I'm just going to make one final point here. For those of you that are wondering, the 49ers are playing the Seahawks this week, and then you've got the Buccaneers playing the Falcons, as well as the Jags are playing the LA Rams. The Giants are playing the Dolphins, and then we got the Vikings and Lions, and then the Cowboys playing the Saints, going on right now as we speak. But I want to talk about something, and one final point I'm going to make here is that in terms of this playoff thing, when we look back at this 2021 season and it's all said and done, the 49ers game is going to be the one that has hurt the Bears the most. All right, in terms of the chances of making the playoffs, because I think right now it is a foregone conclusion that the Rams are winning the NFC West. Okay, it's going to be either the Rams or Cardinals. But the 49ers are kind of the team that's like, it's the little brother that's just kind of in the background, that's relevant, but not like super relevant, but they're just good enough. And again, this was supposed to be the year Trey Lance, but he's been injured. And now you have Jimmy Garoppolo, who's leading the way for basically like the 4th or 5th straight year. But that 49ers game that the Bears lost is going to hurt even more and probably hurts the most because not only was that a game against an NFC opponent that was beatable, it was also a game that was on home field turf for the Bears. And at home, that clearly has bigger playoff implications than if it were to be a game on the road. And so ultimately, you know what? We got 6 weeks left in the season. There's still a lot of football left. We'll be here doing previews and reviews every Monday and Thursday. Make sure you're checking out our weekly show too, guys. We record it on Tuesday nights, drop it on Tuesday night at 11:59 p.m. Central Time. You can follow us on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Fireside Bears. Follow myself and Max on Twitter at MaxSmithESM and at Usayd Kosho. We'll be back on Monday or Tuesday evening, guys, recapping Bears cards and then jumping right into Bears Packers for Sunday Night Football. Stay safe, bear down, keep warm, and yeah, have a great evening. We'll see you guys next week.